Okay. Hello, Lucas. Thanks for joining me. Um, it's a shame the other two couldn't join us, but we're gonna have to crack on because we've been waiting for about an hour now. Um, the meeting I'm going to conduct today is regarding how to conduct a virtual conference call. So just a bit of background to the topic. Before the pandemic, only a fifth of Americans worked from home, and this number spiked during the pandemic to 70%. And even when the pandemic is over, 54% of Americans reported that they wanted to continue working from home. So what this tells us is working from home is just going to be a way of life now. And if many Americans are preferring it, then it's definitely going to be here to stay. And I got that stat from computerweekly.com. So yeah, working from home is the future, and same along with virtual conference meetings. So what this means is more than likely, if you work in a job where meetings occur regularly, you'll have to at some point carry out a virtual conference call. And although technology allows us to nearly replicate in-person meetings, there are still do's and don'ts and certain etiquettes to be cautious of. So hopefully this presentation will serve as a guide to properly conduct a virtual meeting. So the main objectives of this meeting include, I want to teach you how to set up a conference call, and I want to teach you how to successfully conduct a conference call. So why are we learning this? Why is this skill useful? It's extremely useful because especially nowadays, we're in a revolution of how we work. For the first time, you can work from anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world even. You just need to have a laptop. The days of commuting to an office and meeting everyone face to face and the hassle of traffic, it's still necessary to some businesses, but it's no longer essential to making money and making businesses run. And it's especially useful because if you can make that jump between the old way of working and the new way of working, then it gives you a better chance of succeeding. If you have that skill to navigate meeting softwares remotely, then you're already setting yourself aside from all the people that can't. You're part of a new generation of how people work, and it's a skill set that'll definitely set you aside and it'll serve you in the future because this is definitely the way it's going. Being able to transition to holding meetings virtually shows your ability to adapt and showcase your high levels of competency with whatever is required of you. It's also extremely useful because more than a third of workers said they struggle transitioning to remote work due to technological fluency issues. So what this tells me is if you're able to transition by working fully remote and using technology to work, then you're already setting yourself aside from more than 33% of workers across the globe. So you're already setting yourself apart from a third of the people. You're ahead of them in that sense. If you have this skill to fluently navigate yourself through these softwares, then you're definitely putting yourself apart from the rest. And not to mention how marketable it'll make you in this job economy. Right, so onto the meat of the meeting now. I'm just going to outline the steps to conducting a successful virtual conference call. So I've narrowed it down to 5 steps here. The first step is to establish a meeting time and location with all participants. So specify the time zone for those in different countries. So I'm actually working for a company currently. A lot of my counterparts are in the UK, so they're 6 hours ahead. So I have to be extremely cautious of that, especially if I'm on a meeting that requires their expertise. I'm going to have to keep it, before 10 a.m., before 11, so they're not having their dinner and then having to meet me afterwards, just so it's respectful that way. It's also good to specify the time zone because if you just specify time, it can create all sorts of confusion because obviously that the same time number won't mean the same thing in different hemispheres and different parts of the world. So specify the time zone. It's always helpful. Second thing you're going to do is establish your agenda and make sure everyone receives it before the meeting. I'd say this is probably the most important step because especially if you're leading the meeting, if you can keep it to a T, keep everyone on track, and what the expectation is before the meeting, you save so much time. That way everyone knows their action items, everyone knows what's expected of them. It's all written there, it's all been prepared. No one's going into the meeting scrambling and not ready. And if they are, it's on them. So as long as you're clear of the agenda and the scheduling, you make everyone's life a lot easier, including yours. So 3 is as people start to trickle into the meeting, you need to set the tone. So introduce everyone, especially if it's, let's say a client. You always want to put your best foot forward. So you'll introduce yourself, make a good impression. Break the ice maybe. Small personal talk, definitely limited personal talk, but definitely enough to break the ice. You want to explain all meeting etiquette. So that can include, not speaking when others are speaking. That can include keeping your camera on or keeping your camera off. That can include muting your microphone when you're not speaking. All sorts of things. And then once you've set the tone, you want to go over the agenda. Obviously, everyone would have received the agenda prior to the meeting, but you just want to go over it again. So there's no lapse in expectations. Then 4, you're going to carry out the meeting based on the agenda. And 5, you're going to conclude the call. You're going to conclude with calls to action for all outstanding business. So this is where you're going to say all the action steps that were produced from the outcome of the meeting. So things you figured out on the meeting that need to get done, new ideas. When you're listing out action items, you want to put names behind them. You want to be extremely clear with who and when they're due by. And at the end of the meeting is when you'll distribute these action items, and you'll have to make sure they have them prepared for the next meeting. So I'll just go into these a bit deeper now. So obviously the first step is to specify the dimensions of the meeting. So that's when and where, and you also want to make sure you're inviting everyone that's necessary. So if you're inviting people that maybe aren't involved with the work, or maybe you're inviting too many people from the same team, you want to make sure you're inviting the right people. So you're not only just crowding the meeting, but you're not wasting people's time as well. If they don't need to be there, or if they would prefer it to be sent in an email, if it can be sent in an email, always send in an email. You don't want to waste people's time. You want to be very selective and deliberate with who you choose to attend the meeting. You also want to be cautious when you set the time for the meeting to accommodate everyone's schedule. So yeah, again, don't go setting meetings for 8, 9 o'clock in the evening unless it's an emergency. If it's just your regular run of the mill meeting, you want to keep it at a regular working hour. So anywhere between 9 to 5. You want to set the invite so that there's an option to reschedule for a better time, or you can just ask the invitees if it is a good time for them. So yeah, if it's not a good time for them, make them know that you're comfortable with a reschedule, that you can accommodate them. Because there's plenty of times where I couldn't make a meeting and I've said, can I push this back 30 minutes? Just be gracious in that aspect. And then you want to be especially cautious with those working from overseas. I mentioned that earlier, my counterparts in the UK, you have to make sure you do that math in your head and add or subtract how many hours to make sure you know what time it is over there. So definitely be cautious of that. And yeah, at my work, we use Microsoft Teams. So everyone would also obviously have Teams downloaded to the computer beforehand. But it can be Zoom, it can be Skype, it can be whatever medium your company decides to use, but make sure everyone's familiar with it and make sure everyone can navigate it, or else you're just going to waste everyone's time that way. All right, the second thing you're going to do is you're going to want to establish your agenda for the meeting. So you want to be specific in your action items by naming the activity and the person who is responsible for it on the agenda. So yeah, that's the beauty of action items. It's essentially a polite way to ask someone to do this by this time. But ultimately that's the only way you get things done. So when you're making action items list, you want to make sure you put a due date behind it, and you want to make sure you assign personnel, and you want to be very specific in the both. And on the action item line, you obviously want to be very specific and what the outcome of that action should be, and just exactly what the job is. You want to make sure that everyone receives the agenda with ample time before the meeting, which I would recommend around 7 days before the meeting, to ensure that no one feels blindsided during the meeting. This will also save a lot of time, as everyone already knows their responsibilities. So yeah, especially in that last sentence, when you gather people around the table, let's say you have a meeting of 10 to 12 people, gathering 10 to 12 people in the same place is, unless you organize a meeting, it's a pretty tough thing to schedule. So, finding where 12 different people have free time to sit down and have a meeting is quite difficult. So you want to make sure that You respect everyone's time because everyone is busy, everyone made changes. And the best way to do that is to write an agenda beforehand and stick to the agenda. I'd say that's the biggest outcome. Write the agenda beforehand and stick to the agenda. And that's just going to save everyone a lot of time and a lot of energy, and you're just going to get a lot more stuff done that way. And that comes from a bit of real world experience, and it also comes from our textbook, Communicating at Work, on page 235. So I'm just going to share with you now an example of an agenda. Lucas, if you can just give me a thumbs up if you can see that okay. Right, so there you go. So in the top left corner up here, oh, the drop downs happened. Anyways, in the top left corner, you'll have the organizer name, which in this circumstance would be myself. The meeting title, you have your location here. So that's that goes on the first or second step. I can't remember, but specifying your location, specifying the date, specifying the time. On the agenda, here's all the attendees. Your supporting material. This could be, reports. This could be audit files. This could be just anything that's needed for the meeting to run efficiently and smoothly. So previous action items would be things from the last meeting pertaining to the same stuff, but action items that happened at the end of the previous meeting. So things from the previous meeting that you realize had to be done in time for this meeting to make this meeting run smoothly, to make sure that everyone's moving forward in the right direction. Again, you want to be really specific with action items. You want a lot of accountability here. So in here where it says insert item, you can insert exactly what the job was. I would also insert when it needed done by, and I'd put a name on there as well for accountability. So just go through the previous action items, go through the status of them. They should all be completed. If not, someone's not doing their job correctly. And then, yeah, once you've moved on from previous action items, go on to the agenda. The agenda will just be anything pertaining to the current meeting. And, there's meetings for purposes, all sorts of stuff there. There can be audit meetings, there can be report meetings, there could be process meetings, there could be safety meetings. So the agenda will pertain to each specific meeting, and that's on the organizer to fabricate the agenda. And then the agenda, once you filled in the agenda, this is obviously whoever's organizing it. This is what you're going to be referencing throughout the meeting. As people are talking, you're going to be looking at the time. You're going to be making sure that everything's getting crossed off, everything's getting paid attention to, and you're going to stick to that agenda. You're going to stick to it. So once the agenda is over and done with, you're going to move on to the new action items. And that's just everything that you've realized that needs to get done from this meeting in time for the next meeting. Again, you're going to want names, you're going to want due dates. You shouldn't have to be chasing anyone. You just have to assign it, not worry about it until the next meeting, and then just have it done. And at the bottom there is notes and commentaries. That could just be all other business. Any other new information learned from that meeting or anything like that. That's what would go there. Let's go back to the presentation. And Lucas, I'll make sure you get a copy of that at the end of the meeting. It's very helpful. So third step would be to set the tone, introduce people, and get the meeting going. So as everyone trickles into the meeting, you want to be very warm to people. You want to definitely give a relaxing atmosphere, but still give the impression that work needs to get done during the meeting. So not too friendly, but not too serious either. This is especially important because in order for people to feel comfortable to speak up or feel comfortable to do their best work, they have to be relaxed. They can't be anxious or worried about anything. You have to make sure you've set a relaxing tone for the meeting. You've set a productive tone for the meeting. Yeah, a simple way to do that would just be saying, how'd your weekend go? Lucas, like me and yourself, prior to the screen record, we had conversations, just sort of asking, what our deal was, where we're from, just things like that. Just something to break the ice, and it's definitely gone a long way. Feeling a bit more comfortable presenting, and I hope it does the same for you. So when everyone is present, explain etiquette. which can be for everyone to mute their mic when they aren't speaking, or to have people state their name and job before speaking if their camera's turned off. So yeah, Lucas, like you mentioned beforehand, it's probably smart to mute our microphone, and that's a very common thing to point out. In meetings once you get into work life, making sure your microphone's muted. And you'd be surprised, because there's a lot of people that don't understand that concept at all, and there's always just a lot of feedback going on. But yeah, a great example of online meeting etiquette would be to mute their microphone. Another one would be, especially if your camera's turned off, if you speak, you're obviously going to want to state your name beforehand, because no one's going to see your mouth moving. They're just going to see a blank screen. It could be anyone that's talking if there are more than one person with their camera off. So that's another good example. And then all other etiquette, that would happen if we were in person. Don't be rude. Obviously, no discrimination or anything like that. Those are all examples of online meeting etiquette that would be good to explain before the meeting kicks off. And then, yeah, again, I'm just citing that from real world experience and our textbook, and that comes from page 237. Okay, step 4. Now you get into the meat of the meeting. So once after all intros are done and you've gone over the agenda, you want to begin to work through the agenda line by line. And that's important because you've written the agenda for a reason. You want to do it in order. You want to make sure nothing gets missed. Again, the agenda is like your Bible for this meeting. You're going to want to stick to it. Stick to the agenda, stick to the agenda. If someone is taking too long or too little time, remember that it's your job to keep everyone on pace. Like I mentioned earlier, you want to keep track of time. Maybe if you have a 30-minute meeting with 4 action items, maybe 5 minutes max to each action item. I respect that. Maybe one action item might need a bit more time than the others, but as the meeting organizer, and if you're running an online meeting, it's your job to keep everyone on pace and to get everyone out at the time you said you would, or else you're cutting into their time. So yeah, don't be afraid to interrupt anyone or ask for more info. That's a great example. At the start of this meeting, we had 2 no-shows, so we waited an hour. I've got no issue with carrying on after an hour. We did all we could. We had an agenda to follow, so all we're doing is following that agenda. And then, yeah, working through the agenda is where you'll spend the majority of the meeting. Like I said, that's the meat of the meeting. And you want to keep a productive tone. You want to keep everyone on track, and you want to ask the right questions. Okay. And then the final step. So once the agenda has been worked through, everyone will be disoriented, tired, and strung out from working so long. So be sure to summarize and tie a knot around everything in a way that everyone can remember. That's essential because, especially if you have a lot of different minds and a lot of different personalities on the same call, after 30 minutes, after an hour, it can get really draining. And let me just upgrade the meeting time here. Okay, I have 10 minutes left with 2 slides. I'm gonna look at that after this. So I'm just gonna finish up these slides. Yeah, so once the agenda has been worked through, everyone's gonna be tired and strung out. A good skill to learn is not only how to start and carry out a meeting, but it's also how to know when to end one. So, especially when there's a lot of different people on the call, you wanna make sure that not too many inputs are contributed, because once you have too many people working towards the same goal, after a while, you're not actually getting any work done, and you're just going in circles, and everyone's strung out and tired. So that's a great skill to learn, is to when to end a meeting. At the end of the meeting, as mentioned a couple times, you want to create an actions list from that meeting for the next meeting. So this is when you'll distribute actions. This is when you'll distribute names and deadlines for these actions, and you want to make sure that they're done by the next meeting. Yeah, so once you're happy with the agenda being done and you have distributed the action items, you'll schedule the next meeting and end the call after thanking everyone for their time. Make sure everyone has said everything they need to say as well. So yeah, that's just giving an all of the business, a final go around to the table, and just making sure everyone's had their say. That would be step 5, and that's from our textbook. So just to recap, the 5 steps are to establish a meeting time and a location. You want to establish your agenda and make sure everyone receives it before the meeting. You want to set the tone for your meeting by introducing everyone, including yourself, and explain all meeting etiquette. You're then going to want to go over your agenda. And then 4, you're going to want to carry out meetings based on your agenda. And then 5, you're going to conclude with calls to action for all outstanding business. There you go. You have completed your first successful online meeting. To summarize, conducting a virtual conference is a skill well worth learning and perfecting, especially with the way the job market's going and the expansion of technology in the workplace. It's definitely a skill that's worth learning. So feel free to use my handout as a guide on how to conduct a successful virtual conference call whenever you need to. Use my handout as well to sort of write your agenda. And I hope it's been very helpful and informative and educational. So thanks for your time, Lucas. That concludes my presentation.